Welcome to another episode of the Filipino Genealogy Channel. Today, we will be exploring the American side of the family tree of the late Ronald Allan Kelley Poe, whose family tree is the first in our Philippine Showbusiness Clans series. Today, we are going to explore a simplified version of the Kelley family tree of the late Ronald Allan Kelley Poe, or better known as Fernando Poe Jr. As an advance notice, please take note that the family tree is limited only to the direct line of descent from James O'Kelley until Fernando Poe Jr. So let us begin. James O'Kelley was the first Kelley who first came to the United States. He and his wife, Hannah George, were both natives of County Clare, Ireland. County Clare is a county in the province of Munster, Western Ireland. When James O'Kelley and his wife left County Clare in the 1600s, most of County Clare had just been under English colonization, and it may be one of the reasons why they left Ireland. Since they came to Virginia in the early 1600s, they can then be considered as part of the first waves of migrants from the Old World who braved the New World, in search of a better life. There is a story in the Kelley family, that on a later trip to or from Ireland, on his own ship, James was lost in a storm, and the ship was wrecked. John Kelley, the son of James O'Kelley and Hannah George, was the first in the line to be born in the American colony. He married Sarah Bell and they had a son, Edmund, who married Anne Distance. Edmund's son, John Kelley, married Anne Margaret Rush. This couple made quite a headline back in the day when they were accused of living in adultery. Of course, it would soon be made clear that this accusation stemmed from the fact that the couple belonged to the Quaker group, who were being persecuted in the colony by the members of the Church of England. The Quakers were followers of a religious movement that began as an offshoot of Christianity in 17th century England. The movement emphasizes equal, inward access to God for all people. Their worship was most notable for its use of prolonged periods of silence. Quakerism began with George Fox, who spent his early years seeking religious truth and contact with God, but grew dissatisfied with both the priests of the established Church of England and the radical preachers of other denominations. In 1647, he claimed to have a direct encounter with God, and came away believing that true revelation must come not from external teachers, who were themselves sinners, and thus imperfect, but directly from God speaking inwardly to each individual. Despite their hardship, their relatives never abandoned them. And Margaret's family banded together, and even paid their security or a sort of bail. However, the harassment against their family only ended 4 years later after they were required to pay £500 of tobacco or 50 shillings. Had they been unable to pay that particular amount, the punishment according to law would have been 25 lashes well laid on her bare back. The son of John and Margaret was the Reverend Benjamin Kelley. According to the book A History of Kentucky Baptists from 1769 to 1883, Benjamin Kelley was of Irish extraction, and the name was originally written O'Kelley. His grandfather was the only child of Irish parents, and was born on the ocean, as his parents were emigrating to America. In his teen years he was taken prisoner by Indians, though later an old Indian woman adopted him as a son, and he stayed with the Indians for about 6 years. He was later able to escape with the help of his adoptive mother, and was able to return to his family in Virginia. He became a Baptist preacher of strong persuasion, as well as a good English scholar, engaged in teaching for over 30 years, and was ministered to 4 churches, performing marriages in Ohio County and Daviess County in Kentucky. His son and namesake, Benjamin Kelley, served in the War of 1812. Records show Benjamin Kelley serving within the 13th Regiment, Gray's, Kentucky militia, and 4 other sons of his also served in the Army in one capacity or another. Meanwhile, William G. Kelley, the son of Benjamin Kelley Jr., was also a military man. He served as a scout in the 14th Missouri State Militia Volunteer Cavalry, Company G, during the American Civil War. This cavalry later became the 8th Missouri State Militia Cavalry, where in Company L, he served as a blacksmith and a farrier. He also served in this capacity with Company I, Missouri Volunteers, and was honorably discharged on April 12, 1865. William Emery Kelley was the son of William G. Kelley and Anna Eliza Lawler. He married Ida Jane Swisher, and they in turn were the parents of Author E. Kelley, the grandfather of FPJ and the first of the Kelleys to set foot in the Philippines. Kelley had been in the Philippines based on the 1910 U.S. population census. He was assigned in the American military and naval forces in Camp Keithley located in Dansalan, which is now in Marawi City. The 1910 census listed him as single and coming from Missouri. In 1918, in his World War I registration card, he is listed as permanently living in Luray, Clark County, Missouri, and that his birthday was on January 4, 1886. He was listed also as a fireman and worked in the fire department in Manila. Finally, he listed an Ida Kelley as his nearest kin. He married Marta Gatbonton from Pampanga. This is an interesting connection since the Gatbontons are considered descendants of the Lacons of Manila, Tondo, and Pampanga. Author and Marta had 2 daughters, Ruby Kelley, who married Federico Mangas, whose eldest son, Dr. Monger Mangas, is the president of Philippine-based opinion survey firm Social Weather Stations, SWS. The second daughter, Elizabeth, married actor Fernando Poe, and their son was Ronald Allan Poe, more popularly known as Fernando Poe Jr. Fernando Poe Jr., or FPJ to his adoring fans, became one of the most successful movie personalities in the Philippines, much so that he earned the moniker King of Philippine Movies, or simply the King. He married actress Jesusa Sonora, but known as Susan Ross in the silver screen. Their adopted child, Mary Grace Poe, is a senator of the Philippines. From 2 relationships he sired Ronian Poe and Lord Moran Poe, who are both artists as well. He ran for the position of Philippine president against incumbent Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in 2004 but lost. When he ran for president, his opponents questioned his citizenship. But FPJ's genealogy is replete with men and women who showed loyalty to country and love for freedom and justice. In hindsight, the detractors of FPJ who questioned his nationality were the ones who did not understand the concept of nationhood and love of country. FPJ's Spanish grandfather Lorenzo Pou could have returned to Spain after 1898, but instead he remained in the Philippines and died as a Filipino, as listed in his death certificate. On his mother's side, FPJ's American grandfather, Author E. Kelley, could have returned to the United States after the U.S. gave back our independence. Instead, he decided to remain in the country where he had served in the Army since at least 1910. And if those detractors could have looked back into FPJ's American ancestry, they would have seen the amazing traits of his bygone ancestors, men and women who braved the unknown and harsh new world to start a new life, later becoming respectable ministers and founders of churches, and then much later fighting for their country in various wars throughout their nation's history. When one looks at the commonality of the themes of his films, one finds a surprisingly large number of movies about justice. Justice for the oppressed, and the poor, and the defenseless. So much so, that the Filipino masses began to see him as a hero of the masses. Perhaps, subconsciously, he produced and starred in movies that showed him in ways that were very similar to the actions of his Kelley ancestors. Whatever what-ifs in history, Ronald Allan FPJ Kelley Poe certainly had an amazing family tree. And he led an equally amazing life, that has definitely left a mark in the Filipino psyche. Happy birthday, to the king of Philippine movies! So that's it for today's video. We hope you learned something and enjoyed this presentation. Watch out for another video tomorrow at 8 a.m. Philippine Standard Time. Thank you for watching, and always stay safe. Goodbye.